While the world mourned the man in black, his children faced their own demons in his shadow. From devastating addiction cycles that claimed both father and son, to a daughter who lost 4 loved ones in 6 years, including her husband in a tragic motorcycle crash, to bitter family rifts over Hollywood's portrayal of their mother. Johnny Cash's legacy became both blessing and curse for his 5 children. Here's what really happened to Johnny Cash's children. Rosanne Cash. Rosanne Cash achieved something most children of famous musicians never do. She stepped out of her father's shadow and became a major star in her own right, only to watch her personal life crumble in ways that eerily mirrored Johnny Cash's own struggles with addiction and broken relationships. Born in 1955 as Johnny's eldest daughter with his first wife Vivian Liberto, Rosanne initially had no intention of following her father into music. She grew up thinking that fame was about the worst thing you could do, because she watched how it destroyed families through drugs, divorce, and constant touring. But after working briefly as a wardrobe assistant and backup singer on her father's tours in the mid-1970s, she discovered her own musical talent and began writing songs. Her breakthrough came in 1981 with the album 7 Year Aish, which shot to #1 on the country charts and crossed over to mainstream pop success. The title track became her signature hit. And over the next decade, she racked up 11 #1 country singles, 4 Grammy Awards, and established herself as one of the most respected singer-songwriters in American music. Critics praised her ability to blend country with rock, folk, and pop influences, creating a sound that was distinctly her own, rather than simply trading on her father's reputation. But behind the professional success, Rosanne's personal life was falling apart in devastating ways. She had married producer and songwriter Rodney Crowell in 1979. And together, they seemed like country music, royalty. He produced her albums while pursuing his own recording career, and they had 3 daughters together, plus Crowell's daughter from a previous marriage. However, both Rosanne and Rodney were battling serious drug and alcohol addictions that put enormous strain on their marriage and family life. The couple's struggles with addiction became increasingly public as their careers flourished. Crowell later admitted that he was using drugs during that whole period of their early success, describing himself as pushing through that cocaine keyhole while trying to maintain his career. Rosanne was dealing with her own substance abuse issues alongside severe depression that left her unable to get out of bed for extended periods. Friends became so concerned about her condition that they took her to doctors, who diagnosed her with clinical depression. By the late 1980s and early 1990s, their marriage was disintegrating. Rosanne channeled her pain into her 1990 album, Interiors, a sparse, introspective record that marked a complete departure from her previous pop country sound. The album was so dark and personal that her record label initially refused to release it, with executives telling her, "We can't sell this because country radio wouldn't play such emotionally raw material." But Rosanne considered it her best work, and the album became a critical success, even as it signaled the end of her commercial country music career. The divorce from Crowell became final in 1992, and both artists documented the painful dissolution of their marriage through their music. Rosanne's 1993 album, The Wheel, was described by critics as an unflinchingly confessional examination of the marriage's failure, while Crowell released his own brutally honest album called Life is Messy, that explored the same emotional territory from his perspective. Adding to her struggles, Rosanne faced serious health crises that threatened to end her career entirely. She developed vocal polyps twice, which required surgery and months of recovery time when she couldn't perform or even speak normally. Then, in 2007, she underwent brain surgery to correct a Chiari malformation, a condition where brain tissue extends into the spinal canal. The surgery and recovery kept her off the stage for nearly 2 years, during a period when she was unsure if she would ever be able to perform again. Despite these setbacks, Rosanne eventually found stability with producer John Leventhal, whom she married in 1995, and continued recording and touring while based in New York City rather than Nashville, marking her complete break from the country music establishment that had made her famous. Kathy Cash. Kathy Cash made one of the most definitive rejections of fame in music history, turning her back on her father's world after just 5 performances, and later stunning her family with a fierce public battle against Hollywood's portrayal of her mother that left lasting rifts within the Cash clan. Born in 1956 as Johnny and Vivian Cash's second daughter, Kathy grew up watching her father's career destroy their family through addiction, constant touring, and eventual divorce. Unlike her older sister Rosanne, who eventually embraced music, Kathy developed an immediate and visceral hatred of the spotlight that would define her entire relationship with her father's legacy. When Johnny tried to include Kathy in family performances during the late 1970s, including their 1978 Christmas television special, where she sang Silent Night alongside her sisters and stepsisters, the experience was traumatic for her. Years later, Kathy described her brief attempt at performing with brutal honesty, telling interviewers that her father put her on stage and "my knees were knocking" because she didn't enjoy it at all. She explained that while she wasn't naturally shy, being on stage filled her with such terror that she could barely function. After exactly 5 performances with her father, Kathy made a decision that shocked the music world. She walked away completely. Johnny, recognizing his daughter's genuine distress, gave her an ultimatum that most stage parents would never offer. If you want to sing, sing. If you don't, don't. When Kathy told him, "This just isn't me," Johnny simply replied, "That's okay, baby. If it's not you, it's not you," and never pressured her to perform again. This moment of understanding between father and daughter became one of the few bright spots in their complicated relationship. Kathy chose to live a deliberately private life, marrying musician Jimmy Tittle in 1982 and raising 3 children while staying completely out of the public eye. The irony that she married someone in the music industry, despite her own hatred of performing, was not lost on those who knew her. But Tittle respected her desire for privacy and never pushed her toward the spotlight. However, Kathy's quiet life was shattered in 2005 when the biographical film Walk the Line was released, starring Joaquin Phoenix as Johnny Cash and Reese Witherspoon as June Carter Cash. The movie, which focused on Johnny's romance with June and his struggles with addiction, portrayed Kathy's mother, Vivian Liberto, in a way that sent Kathy into a rage that surprised even her own family. Actress Ginnifer Goodwin played Vivian in the film, but Kathy felt the portrayal was completely unfair and historically inaccurate. At a private family screening of the movie, Kathy became so upset that she walked out not once, but 5 separate times during the same screening. Her anger was so intense that she couldn't even sit through the entire film with her relatives. Kathy then did something completely out of character for someone who had spent decades avoiding publicity. She went public with her criticism. In interviews with major media outlets, she condemned the film's portrayal of her mother with surprising vehemence, telling reporters that "my mom was basically a non-entity in the entire film, except for the mad little psycho who hated his career." She insisted this characterization was not true, and explained that her mother, "I loved his career and was proud of him until he started taking drugs and stopped coming home." The public battle over Walk the Line revealed the depth of pain that still existed within the Cash family more than 40 years after Johnny and Vivian's divorce. Kathy's decision to break her decades-long silence about family matters showed how deeply the Hollywood version of events had wounded her, particularly since her mother Vivian had died just months before the film's release and couldn't defend herself. Even her sister Cindy supported Kathy's stance, refusing to watch the film at all. This family rebellion against the movie's narrative demonstrated that the children of Johnny Cash's first marriage felt their mother's story had been erased or distorted by the focus on Johnny's more famous second marriage to June Carter Cash. Cindy Cash. Cindy Cash experienced one of the most devastating stretches of loss imaginable, watching four of the most important people in her life die within 6 years, including her husband, who was killed in a mysterious motorcycle accident that left authorities and family members with more questions than answers. Born in 1959 as Johnny and Vivian Cash's third daughter, Cindy initially embraced her father's musical world more than some of her sisters. As a teenager, she toured with Johnny and her stepmother, June Carter Cash, performing songs like "Lay Me Down in Dixie" with her father in 1979 when she was just 20 years old. She loved being on the road with Johnny, later telling interviewers that touring was where he was most comfortable and where we got to know each other best. We bonded, and I found out that I am much like him. It's scary. Cindy even formed her own band called The Next Generation in the late 1980s, which included other children of country music stars, Peggy Lynn, daughter of Loretta Lynn, Kathy Twitty, daughter of Conway Twitty, and Georgette Jones, daughter of George Jones and Tammy Wynette. Though the band never released an album, it represented Cindy's attempt to carve out her own space in the music world while honoring her father's legacy. Her personal life, however, followed a pattern of love found and lost that would culminate in unimaginable tragedy. Cindy's first marriage was to her high school sweetheart, Chris Brock, when she was just 18 years old. That marriage lasted only 3 years, though it produced her daughter, Jessica Doreen Brock. After the divorce, Cindy moved to Hendersonville, Tennessee, to be closer to her father's world. In 1983, Cindy married country singer and songwriter Marty Stewart, who was already making a name for himself in Nashville. The marriage seemed to offer Cindy a chance at happiness within the music industry, but it too ended in divorce after 5 years in 1988. Stewart would go on to become a major country star, but his brief marriage to Cindy became just a footnote in both of their lives. After remaining single for more than a decade, Cindy found love again in 2003 when she married Eddie Panetta, a 53-year-old man who brought stability and joy back into her life. Panetta was described by those who knew him as a kind, compassionate, happy man who was extraordinarily devoted as a husband. Cindy called him "my rock and my angel." And for 6 years, it seemed she had finally found lasting happiness. But then came the devastating sequence of losses that would define the darkest period of Cindy's life. In May 2003, her stepmother, June Carter Cash, died unexpectedly. Just 4 months later, in September 2003, her father, Johnny Cash, passed away from complications of diabetes. The loss of both parental figures within months of each other was devastating, but worse was yet to come. In 2005, Cindy's mother, Vivian Liberto, died, completing the loss of all 3 of her primary parental figures within 2 years. Cindy later described this period as one of prolonged grief, but she still had her husband, Eddie, to help her through the emotional devastation. The final and most shocking blow came on June 5, 2009, when Eddie Panetta set out for a motorcycle ride near Lake Casitas in Ventura County, California, and never returned home. When he failed to come back, Cindy filed a missing person report with local authorities. The next day, Panetta's son-in-law, Christopher Hess, retraced the motorcycle route and made the horrific discovery he found Panetta's body alongside Highway 150, where he had apparently lost control of his motorcycle and crashed. The circumstances surrounding Panetta's death raised troubling questions that were never fully answered. He was an experienced rider who was wearing a helmet and protective leather clothing, and his wife Cindy believed the accident could not have happened because of something her husband did. California Highway Patrol officials determined that Panetta had lost control while riding west on the highway, but the exact cause remained unclear. leaving Cindy to wonder what had really happened to the man she called her best friend, who knew my soul. Tara Cash. Tara Cash chose a path of deliberate invisibility that stands in stark contrast to her famous family name, building a quiet, creative life behind the scenes in film production while preserving her father's most intimate memories through one of the most personal father-daughter projects in music history. Born on August 24, 1961, in Memphis, Tennessee, Tara was the youngest of Johnny and Vivian Cash's 4 daughters and just 5 years old when her parents divorced in 1966. Growing up, primarily with her mother in California, Tara watched from a distance as her father's career continued to dominate headlines while her older sisters navigated their own relationships with fame and the music industry. Unlike her sisters, Tara showed no interest in pursuing music or seeking the spotlight that came with being Johnny Cash's daughter. Instead, she gravitated toward the technical and creative aspects of entertainment that happen away from public view. She found her calling in costume design and wardrobe work for television and film productions, contributing to projects like the 1989 television movie Nashville Beat and Tennessee Nights, where she worked as a wardrobe assistant. Tara's most significant contribution to preserving her father's legacy came through an incredibly personal project that began in 1995. At that time, Johnny Cash was in his 60s, and Tara realized that many of his childhood stories and memories had never been formally recorded. Rather than conducting a traditional interview or hiring a professional biographer, Tara took a much more intimate approach. She gave her father a blank book titled Dad, Share Your Life with Me, and asked him to fill it with his own handwritten memories of growing up in Arkansas. The request touched something deep in Johnny Cash, and he spent an entire year carefully answering his daughter's questions about his childhood, his family, his friends, and the experiences that shaped him before he became famous. When Tara's birthday arrived in 1996, Johnny presented her with the completed book as her gift, filled with his own handwriting and personal reflections that had never been shared with the public or even with most family members. Tara treasured this handwritten memoir for nearly 20 years, keeping it as a private family treasure. But in 2014, recognizing the historical value of her father's words and wanting to share this unique perspective with his fans, she decided to publish Recollections by J.R. Cash, Childhood Memories of Johnny Cash. The book featured Johnny's original handwritten responses alongside personal family photographs that Tara carefully selected to illustrate his stories. What made this book so special was that Johnny's answers came from questions that no interviewer had ever thought to ask during his decades of fame. As Tara explained to radio station KASU, these questions are not the typical questions that he was asked in the countless number of interviews he did in his career. The book revealed intimate details about Johnny's childhood in the New Deal community of Dyess, Arkansas, his family relationships, his early work ethic, and the dreams that first took shape in his youth. The project represented everything that defined Tara's approach to her father's legacy, deeply personal, carefully considered, and focused on preserving authentic history rather than seeking attention for herself. She described holding the book close to my heart for all these years, before deciding to share it, knowing that her father would be proud to share these stories. Today, Tara continues to live quietly in Portland, Oregon, with her husband Fred Schwobel, who works as a filmmaker and art director, and their 2 sons, Alex and Aran. She has occasionally appeared in documentaries about her father, including the 2020 film My Darling Vivian, which she co-produced to tell her mother's story, but she consistently chooses projects that honor family history rather than promote her own public profile. Her work as a jewelry designer allows her to express creativity while maintaining the privacy she has always valued, and her behind-the-scenes film work continues to keep her connected to the entertainment industry without requiring her to step into the spotlight that has defined so much of her family's experience. John Carter Cash. John Carter Cash shattered one of the most enduring myths in country music history when he revealed that his parents never truly conquered their addictions, exposing the painful reality behind the Hollywood redemption story while battling his own inherited demons that nearly destroyed him before he found salvation through faith. Born on March 3, 1970, as the only child of Johnny Cash and June Carter Cash, John Carter represented hope for both parents who saw his birth as a chance for a fresh start. Indeed, Johnny Cash did achieve a remarkable 7-year period of sobriety that coincided with his son's early childhood, staying completely clean from drugs and alcohol during some of John Carter's most formative years. But this period of family stability was not destined to last. When John Carter was 7 years old, his father relapsed back into drug use, beginning a cycle that would continue for the rest of Johnny's life. What made this particularly traumatic for young John Carter was that he became an unwilling witness to his father's struggles in the most intimate settings. During family tours, John Carter often shared hotel rooms with his father, and he would lie in bed at night listening to Johnny's labored breathing, counting the seconds between breaths, and debating whether to tell his mother that his father was high again. John Carter knew that alerting June would lead to explosive confrontations between his parents, so he often chose to suffer in silence rather than trigger another family crisis. This impossible burden for a child to carry created what John Carter later described as a strategy of emotional self-protection. He learned to shield his heart from the chaos around him, but this coping mechanism would eventually contribute to his own addiction problems. As John Carter entered his early 20s, he found himself following the same destructive path that had plagued his family for generations. He developed serious problems with drugs and alcohol, and in his own words, he dealt with addiction issues, especially when I was younger in my early 20s. The irony was devastating. Here was a young man who had watched addiction tear his family apart, yet he couldn't escape its grip himself. The situation became even more complex when John Carter learned that his mother, June, who was supposed to be his father's anchor and support system, had also developed her own prescription drug problems. John Carter later revealed that June became what he called a compulsive pill popper, meaning that both of his parents were struggling with substance abuse simultaneously throughout much of his childhood and young adulthood. In his 2007 book, Anchored in Love, John Carter made the shocking revelation that completely contradicted the popular narrative about his parents' marriage. While movies like Walk the Line portrayed June as the woman who saved Johnny from his addictions, John Carter told the devastating truth. Given all the problems Mom had lived through due to the devastating addictions of her husband and children, it seems impossible to believe that she would fall under the spell of drugs herself. But that's exactly what happened. Even more damaging to the Hollywood version of events, John Carter revealed that both of his parents remained what he called abusive addicts, right up until their deaths in 2003. He explained that his father never stopped using substances and described the last 10 years of Johnny's life as a period when he was an abusive addict for the most part. This contradicted decades of public relations efforts that portrayed Johnny's later years as a time of wisdom and sobriety. Despite witnessing this ongoing destruction, John Carter eventually found his own path to recovery through his Christian faith. He described his relationship with God as unshakable, saying, "Nothing can take away my salvation, and when I struggle, I always go back to that." His recovery allowed him to develop a deeper relationship with his father during Johnny's final years, and they were able to forgive each other and heal before Johnny's death. Today, John Carter works as a successful music producer, author, and performer, using his platform to share both the inspiring and the painful truths about his family's legacy, while maintaining his commitment to sobriety and faith.